My name is Josh, and welcome to Hide and Seek Archives, a podcast where we talk about things supernatural, cryptid, or unexplained. And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Today we have Ray, author of the CRYPTIDNALS. How are you, Ray?
Pretty good, sir. Good to be on here. Thank you guys for extending the invite. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. So, Ray, what got you into the subject of cryptids and the supernatural?
Ever since I was a little boy, I guess you could say, I've been surrounded by paranormal activity and stuff, but I never really realized it until I got later in my years what exactly was going on. And my family was pretty screwed up, just to mention that. But I was 12 years old when I had my first experience that I can actually recall and remember, and it was La Llorona. I experienced what I can only refer to as La Llorona.
And that is the Skinwalker.
She's it's a myth, I guess, down here in the border area, all along the border in Texas, New Mexico. It's the woman that drowned her and murdered her children, and then she tried to murder her or then kill herself, and she was damned. Woman. Yes, exactly. She's damned to wander forever, for eternity.
La Llorona. That's okay. Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about now. I was thinking of something else. I apologize. I know the legends and all that. The Weeping Woman. Those I've never lived around that. Can you tell us a little bit about those legends?
So the legend has it, of course. It always starts off like that. There was a woman, and there's a lot of different stories surrounding who she was. The one that I tend to gravitate to is her name was Marina. And she actually helped Cortez conquer, the Mayans and the Aztecs. And she was actually a lover of Cortez when he showed up. And they call her La Malinche also. There's a lot of different stories surrounding that. And Cortez, when he was here, he had to return back to Spain. But when he left her with children. And, they were, half-breed. They were white and Mexican. Or native at that time, and she was kind of shunned by the rest of her village. And Cortez left, and then years later, Cortez returned, and he brought his family with him. He brought his wife. He brought his whole everybody that was his family, and she was there waiting for him, like, oh my God, he's back. But she shunned him, or rather, he shunned her, and was like, hey, I don't want anything to do with you. Whatever happened. You had the kids, just leave me alone. I got my family. And she thought that if she got rid of her kids, that maybe Cortez would find her more desirable. So she took the children to the river and drowned them. And she went back to Cortez and told him, like, this is what I've done for you. I got rid of the kids. I can be with you now. We're good. And Cortez was like, are you crazy? No, I want you even less now. You're a murderer. Get away from me. So she was so, I guess, disgusted with herself and just ashamed of what she had done, that she went back to the river and she drowned herself. But because of the sin she had committed, which is patricide, she was damned for all eternity to wander the earth searching for her children. So the legend has it, of course, that if you misbehave at night, especially in the border area, through Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, all the way up to California, if you misbehave at night, or if you're out late at night, you are disobedient to your parents, La Llorona will show up and take you as her own, because she's looking for her children. And you can always hear her coming because she's always crying, and she'll always be saying, mis hijos, mis hijos, mis hijos, mis hijos, which means my children, my children. And that's the legend of La Llorona in a nutshell, of course. The version that I heard.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said that was your first experience?
Yes, that was my first experience. When I was about 12 years old, my sister and brother-in-law, they lived further out from El Paso. We refer to it as the boonies, I guess. It was this one area of El Paso called Moon Road. And in Moon Road, it was a lot of like little houses that people built up on their own. You know, their water was scarce and all this other stuff, and so they had to like put everything, you know, cart everything in. And my brother-in-law had built their house out of a garage that was part of the main house where his family lived. And when you drove up into the garage, there was this big cinder block wall with an oak door right in the middle of the wall, and it was a perfect square. And I'm giving you the layout because it does come into play. So as soon as you walk into the door, immediately to your left there was another door that led to the backyard where the dogs were, and then behind that there was a rock wall, and then a canal, and then nothing but cotton fields. And immediately as soon as you walk in front of you, there's a small living room with 2 couches. To the left there was a kitchen, and then straight back was the master bedroom with this huge window that looked out into the backyard where the wall was, and behind that, of course, you know, there was the irrigation ditch and the cotton fields. So my brother-in-law had gotten, and this is an age gauge right here, guys. So my brother-in-law had gotten a satellite dish back in the day, and he asked me like, "Hey, Raymond, do you want to come over and watch the Playboy channel?" And I was like excited as hell. I was like, "Oh my God, I get to watch a Playboy channel. Hell yeah." So my sister asked my parents, and they were cool with it. I went out there for the weekend to stay with them. And back in the day, if you wanted to watch something on satellite, we had to wait till a certain time of night to aim the satellite in that direction in order to get the reception. So we waited till about midnight. My brother-in-law set up the satellite. You know, my sister-in-law had already gone to bed, and him and I just stayed up watching Playboy channel. Somewhere along the lines, we passed out. I passed out. He passed out. I will wake up to loud pounding on that door that was in the front of the little garage area, and bum 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 bum. It's like pounding, bum 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 bum. And I sit up, and I thought it was my brother-in-law that had locked himself out. I didn't bother looking to see if he was there or not. And I went to the door, and the dogs are going crazy. They're barking because it was like towards summer, and the door was open to let the cool air in at night. The dogs are barking. I go to the door. I'm about to open the door, and my brother-in-law sits up from the other couch. And he's like, whoa, hold on. Don't open the door. It's La Llorona. If you open the door, she'll come in here and she'll take us all. And I turned to look at him like, what? Oh, okay. So then who's knocking? As I'm reaching for the door, I'm like frozen in place. I hear it. I hear this thing. I can't really describe what it sounds like. It sounded like severe, like lamentation, I guess, like someone screaming. They were in pain. They were in despair. And it just kept going, and the dogs, they shut up. They stopped barking. And this thing went on forever, and I was frozen in place trying to reach for the door handle, and I had this compulsion to open the door. I wanted to see what was on the other side, like so badly. And my sister comes out from the back, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's happening again." And I'm like, "What do you mean again?" In my head, I'm like, what do you mean again? And she's like, "Come back, sit down on the couch, don't open the door." It took everything I had as a 12-year-old kid to just pull myself away from the couch or from the door and sit down on the couch. But finally I did. And as I'm going to go to the couch, it stopped wailing. And this is the part that sticks with me. And even every time I tell the story, I get the same feeling. It gives me chills because whatever it was took a breath. And when it took a breath, it sounded like it was trying to breathe underwater, like it was gurgling, like it had liquid in its lungs, whatever. And it did that, and then it started wailing again. And I went and I sat down on the couch, and it seemed like forever, and this thing just kept going. The dogs were quiet. This thing was just like wailing and wailing, and finally it stopped. And when it stopped, it was as if this bright light, like sunlight almost, came in through the cracks in between the door and the cinder blocks and lit up the room. It was as bright as sunlight. That's how bright it was. And then it faded out like really, really strangely. And as soon as it faded out, the dogs started barking again. Everything came back to normal. And I was just sitting there like, what the hell just happened? And I looked at my brother-in-law and looked at my sister and I'm like, what just happened? And they're like, don't worry about it. Just go to bed, go to sleep. We'll talk about it tomorrow. There was no way in hell I could go back to sleep after that. Yeah. I was just like lying there like, what did I just experience? What just happened? The next day comes and I ask them and they don't want to talk about it. They're like, no, nothing happened. We don't know what you're talking about. Just let it go. And it weighed on me. I was like, what did I just like experience? It took me years to figure out what it was or what I believe it was, which was La Llorona. But also it took me even longer to figure out that the reason that it was there was because these people were doing stuff that I wasn't aware of. I started finding out stuff about my family. Started finding out stuff about my sister, my brother-in-law. When I was a kid, that was the first place, because they lived in that house for a very long time, or in that little apartment type house for a very long time. And I started remembering, and it happened when I started telling the story again more and more, that they had a lot of like occult books. They had a lot of curios. That was the first time that I experienced a Ouija board, that I knew what a Ouija board was now, but back then I just thought it was like a game with a board with letters.
Yeah.
That was the first place that I ever read the Satanic Bible. Stuff like that. A bunch of stuff like that started popping into my head, and it seemed like that followed me back to my house. Whatever it was that manifested itself that night seemed to follow me back to my house. My parents, after a few years, they became very hostile towards one another. The house that I grew up in was very, very much full of negative energy. I used to call it, and my wife has experienced a lot of the stuff that I experienced as well, because she lived there at that house for a very long time with me. It was a lot of shadow people, a lot of activity like that, a lot of paranormal activity. There was not only shadow people, but there was also the I call them like white shadow people. They look like a halo, but they're not dark. They're like white. Like when you see the outline of a person.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like. They look like they're like ghosts, I guess you could say. And they would walk around the house. You would see them walk, following my parents around the house. My mom would be walking down the hall, and like not even a few seconds later, the shadow would be like walking right behind her.
Is that right?
And my wife saw like a bunch of stuff as well. We wake up in the middle of the night, and you would see whatever it was, and you can always tell what they are because they're darker than the rest of the darkness. I guess that's the only way you can put it.
Okay.
And it looks like a shape, right? I saw the Hat Man as well a few times. My friends would come over to the house, and they would refuse to come pick me up at night or drop me off at night, because when they would park the car and wait for me, they would see them outside, like walking around.
Yeah.
The backyard, I saw them a few times. They would like gather in mass in the backyard, and it would look like sharks swarming in the middle of the backyard. Wow. They'd go over the wall. It would look like venom, like going over the wall, stuff like that. And to this day, like my friends, like, I bring it up to them, and they're like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want.
Yeah.
And these are like, these are big guys. A lot of these guys are like bouncers and stuff like that. And they were deathly afraid of what they experienced there at my house. And I think all of that stemmed from this first experience that I had with La Llorona, because my parents were also, or rather my mother was also into some stuff that I wasn't aware of until, years later when I started figuring out stuff.
Did that scare you? Did they mess with you? Were you okay being there while that was going on, or did you want to leave, or how did it affect you? It's strange when no one's ever asked me that question, and now that I think about it, it seemed like I didn't want to leave. It seemed like I was grounded there, or rather like something kept me there, and I didn't want to leave. It took a lot for us to finally leave the house. My mother, in her later years, she kind of like lost it, and she literally divided the house in half. And we used to make fun of her because, she made her own like section of the house in the back, like her own apartment. We called it the West Wing. She's in the back, and my dad lived in the front, and that's where we live. We live with my dad because my dad was older in age, and we took care of him a little bit. And we would still see these things. We would still experience a lot of stuff like that. But it never, how can I put it? I was never afraid. I was never scared. But there was that, now that you mentioned it like that, there was something that kept me there longer than I should have stayed there. So I don't know. Now that I think about it, I'm like, Yeah. Did you still experience it when you finally left? Did you experience it, or did they stay at the house? I mean,
they stayed at the house. We bounced around a bit, but the main like activity stayed at the house. Everything else that we experienced after that was something that was already there where we went. It wasn't the same as what we experienced at my original home. And my parents, like I said, they had a lot of problems over the years. I remember there was several occasions, not just once or twice, but my dad would go to the church and ask for a priest to show up to bless the house. And he would do that like every few years. I remember it would happen quite often. The priest would show up. He'd go to all the rooms. He'd throw the holy water everywhere, bless the house, and leave. And then it would calm down for a little while, and then it'd start up again. Whatever it was would start up again.
Interesting. Wow. Do you feel like after your initial experience, do you feel like you're drawn to certain? I mean, do you feel like you're sensitive to things, or sensitive to paranormal because of your first experience? Do you feel like things are drawn to you? Do you feel like you have maybe you have access to see things, or you experience things that maybe other people wouldn't if they were with you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel like I draw things to myself, but usually I'm not the one that sees them. Usually it's people around me. My wife, however, she's very empathic. She senses a lot. She has dreams where she sees things that happen, and then they come to pass later on down the road. But as far as me actually witnessing something, it's really, really toned down ever since I left the house.
I see.
So it's been quite a few years. I think it's been, how many years? Like 8 or 9 years? Mm-hmm.
No, well, yeah, 2012.
Yeah, like 2012. So it's been almost 10 years.
Okay.
And now it's really strange because so my father ended up passing away, and after he passed away, my mom lived at the house for a very long time. And this is the first time I shared this with anybody as well. So I would go visit my mom until she wasn't able to take care of herself anymore, and she was put into a nursing home. And after she was put into a nursing home, going into the house, everything feels desolate. It doesn't feel like it was ever lived in, and it's a very strange feeling, because when you go into a house and people have lived there before, you always get that feeling like, wow, this house has good bones. It's someone's been here, someone they lived life, however that may have been. But now going into the house, it feels desolate. That's the only word that I can think of. It doesn't feel dead. It doesn't feel alive. It feels like nothing, which is really weird for me to experience going into the house, knowing that I grew up there, and remembering the memories that I had, when things were good.
Gotcha. So with these experiences you had, I guess you developed an interest in the paranormal, and is that how you kind of got to where you're at now?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You had an interest in.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, I experienced a lot of stuff that my mom would do. Not so much like her directly, but indirectly, because I guess she would go to people that would tell her to do certain things. And then she'd come back to the house and she'd ask me to help her, like, I guess, complete these tasks or whatever you want to call them. And that kind of piqued my interest. Like, well, what is she doing? What am I doing here? And, I would look it up. I would kind of research it, back then before internet, I'd look up books and, look to see what was going on. And I found out some pretty crazy stuff that she was doing, but it also piqued my interest in the way that, I was curious as to what else was out there. Yeah. And, the evolution seemed kind of easy. It was paranormal. It was like ghosts and shadow people, and it led into like, demons and possession and, looking that stuff up, and then into monsters, which is like the cryptid part, which I'm at right now. So yeah, I kind of like slowly got into the cryptid part, especially listening to a lot of stories growing up about stuff that was in the area, and then the experience I had with what I assume was La Llorona as well.
I see. So that's kind of where your interest lies now, mainly is in the cryptid area.
Yes, that's more. I've done tons and tons of research. I've been working on this book since like 2016.
Okay.
Everything in the book I've tried to draw from reality, from actual events that happened in reality, and I put that into the book. The story is more horror driven than it is any action or anything like that.
Okay.
And I take away, the perspective is more from the monster's point of view than it is from humans. The human aspect of the book is really played down. There's not a lot of human interaction. It's mostly just the monsters and what they're experiencing, what they're witnessing. The only way I can describe it is like X-Men, but written well with monsters. That's the closest I can come to.
Gotcha. So when you got in the cryptid, so I guess your experiences are, do you actively get out in the field and do research, in other words?
Yes, I try to, whenever I find out that there's something out there, I try to go and find out firsthand what's going on. The most recent one was, I think I was talking to you guys about it in the green room, this Horizon City monster thing, which is a Sasquatch, and it's here in El Paso. Growing up, I heard about it. I saw the newspaper clipping about it one time, and I started, going out to Horizon, going out to Waco Tanks where it was seen. And Horizon was before kind of like the last stop before you left El Paso. It was way out there in the boonies, but now it's grown immensely. So when you go out there, there's like just houses and there's restaurants and stores and stuff like that. So I feel like this thing might be getting pushed further out towards like Carlsbad and stuff like that. But originally, what I found out was that there was this thing, and they called it a desert ape. It apparently was about between 7 to 8 feet tall, and the way that they first found out about it was it had gotten into the country club that's out there. It's the Horizon City Country Club. And the security guards caught this thing drinking water out of like the little pond area that they had for the golf course. It was on the golf course and eating ducks. It was eating the ducks.
Oh, wow.
Drinking the water. Yeah. And they chased it off apparently, and the thing left, but it kept coming back. And that's when they started going out there and looking for it, and they couldn't find it. It would disappear. And the newspaper article came out. I wish I had the link. I would send it to you so you could check it out. But that's where it all began right there. And I was very curious as to what that was. So I would go out there to Waco Tanks with my friends. We had a good friend of ours that was a park ranger at Waco Tanks, which is not very far from where Horizon is. And that's where I started finding out more information that the natives of the area had seen these things for thousands of years. And that there's actual cave paintings in the park, in the Waco Tanks Park. And Waco Tanks is very famous because a lot of, what is it called? Like mountain climbers, I guess. They would go out there and practice because everything's very like hilly and there's like some mountains out there. And it would draw a lot of tourists for that reason. They go out there with their gear and, they climb and, they camp out and stuff. And they would find, these cave paintings. So they start sealing those off from the public. And, you could go, if you asked for a special tour, they would take you to check them out. But on these paintings, they would find these creatures, these things that were painted on the walls by these natives, and they resembled the Bigfoot. They resembled Sasquatch. And I would ask the park rangers, and the park ranger was native, and he went on to tell me that, yes, these things have been out here. The natives have known them for a very long time. They call them desert apes. There was an actual name that he gave me, but I can't remember at the moment what it was. But that they would use the cave system, because it was so hot and it was so cold that the caves were the natural, the perfect place for them to survive, the brutal summers and the cold winters and stuff. And that's how they would travel around. So the cave systems opened up in different areas of El Paso and Horizon, and that's how these things would get around.
Interesting. Are the cave systems, is it pretty extensive? I mean, or is there a pretty large...
From what I know, the only ones that know where they are the rangers, because all that information is kept from the public so that they don't go in there and disturb the paintings and disturb the Wacos. Waco means hollow, and tanks. Well, of course, tanks means like a tank. So they were these hollow tanks that during the rain season would fill up with water, and that's where the natives would come in and get their water from.
Oh, okay.
Waco Tanks.
Interesting.
So, and really quickly, I don't know if you guys, I know you guys are you're both into the cryptozoology, and you're cryptozoologists at that. You guys listen to other podcasts and stuff like that?
We do.
Yes. You do? So there was this one podcast that I heard last year. It was a Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes, I forget his last name.
Germer. Wes Germer.
There you go. Mm-hmm. And he had a caller on there, and this is what sparked my interest in the desert ape thing again. He had a caller on there that called in from El Paso. So this caller said that he was a member of the SWAT team in town, and they were out in Waco Tanks doing maneuvers. They were doing exercises. And as soon as he said that, I knew exactly where that is, because I have been out there and I know exactly where that area is. And it's a little bit, further out from Waco Tanks is. And he went on to say that after they were done with their exercises, they were coming back into the city, and I don't know what they were in. I think they were like in separate vehicles or something. But he said that something jumped out at them and tried to ram their vehicle, and they had to swerve off to the side of the road. And that the thing, he said it was at least between 8 and 9 feet tall, that it roared at them, and that they actually thought that they were all going to die. And these are SWAT team guys, They all thought they were going to die, and this thing came at them, and right before it made contact, it just ran off into the desert. And I'm like, holy crap, I know where that is. And I've been out there a few times after, even though COVID and everything, I went out there a few times after to go check it out at night and stuff. I haven't found anything yet, but I'm wanting to go back out there. And that was what sparked my interest again in the whole desert ape or Sasquatch from here in El Paso. And I don't know if you guys have heard about that or not.
I don't remember that. I've listened to a lot of the episodes, but I've definitely listened to some that were military related. I don't know. I may have heard it, just forgot about it, but it doesn't seem familiar. I've heard some other stories that involved either police officers and actually the some of the most fascinating encounters I've heard have involved police officers, I think, and military. But
oh man. The ones that I've heard that he broadcasts, some of them give me like chills, man.
Oh, yeah,
I'm like, wow. Especially the ones that come from, like you said, from military or the park rangers. The ones that come from the rangers really scare me because, these guys are out there almost every day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, and I don't want to go into detail and stuff because, just it's your show, not their show. But yeah, it's crazy, crazy stuff. So
yeah, it's definitely some crazy stuff out there. Well, tell us about some of the experiences you've had. When you've gone out and done your research, what have you encountered, or what type of, have you had any harrowing encounters?
not quite, man. I wish I had more, like, I guess, I don't know, scary encounters, but everything has been so far very, very calm, I guess you could say. The one time that we did go out there, I was doing research on the man dog, which is I guess, one of the cryptids that's in the book. So really quickly, like some backstory on the man dog. There's another suburb of El Paso called San Elizario. And back in the 1800s, San Elizario was very active because there was a salt trade between the U.S. and Mexico. There was a small village that sat on the border between the U.S. and Mexico, very close to Sanelli. And eventually it was, swallowed up by Sanelli and became part of it. But the villagers that lived there were hired on by the landowners to mine the salt from the salt flat that was about 50 miles away. It was close to Carlsbad. So they would go out there, they'd gather the salt, bring it back in wagons, and then cross it over to Mexico. So something happened where the landowners were being very, I guess, cruel to the villagers, and the villagers weren't taking it. So they fought back and they started murdering people, like left and right. Mm-hmm. And the landowners in San Elizario, they panicked and they called the Texas Rangers. And you can look this up because it's the only time in recorded U.S. history that the Texas Rangers, were ever defeated in anything, in any sort of skirmish or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So the Rangers showed up to settle them down, and the villagers turned around and they killed all the Rangers. Then they hacked them up into pieces and they threw them down a well. And we went out there to go investigate that, and we actually did catch some EVPs of the well, the supposed well, where these pieces of people were thrown down. But it always fascinated me. And then I went deeper into the legend, and apparently one of the villagers was a shaman, and he cursed one of the Rangers and said, because of the cruelty that you've done, the atrocities that you've committed against people, I curse you. I curse you to wander the land like a dog and never find a home until you're redeemed. And apparently that's what happened. So if you go down to San Elizario around midnight, of course, because it's always at midnight, and you're driving around the little roads, because San Eli is still a very small town, you'll see someone on the side of the road walking, and they'll be hunched over. And as you pass them by and look back, you'll see them with the head of a dog on, like a human body. Supposedly they're carrying a dead cat around their neck or something like that. That's just to add to it. But Supposedly, it's the head of a dog on a human body, and they're just wandering around the streets in San Elizario. And I was like, holy crap, that's crazy, like cool at the same time. So I wanted to put that character in the book. So I did the research and everything, and that's actually drawn from what happened in history. You know, this Texas Ranger, and he's cursed, and he's in the book, and he has these 2 pistols that are kind of like spectral pistols. And he's trying to redeem himself, and he has, he looks like a dog, and we call him Dogman, or rather the Man Dog. And he's like a cowboy, he kind of reminds everybody of like Wolverine kind of thing. And that's one of the characters in the book of the CRYPTIDNALS.
Interesting.
What are all the characters that are in the book?
We tried to jam pack as many cryptids as we could into the book, but the main characters are, of course, the Man Dog. We have Spring-Heeled Jack, which I did find out after doing some research that Spring-Heeled Jack was not just in Britain or England. He actually was seen in Texas and in New Mexico back in the 1950s, and that kind of like got my gears going as well. So Spring-Heeled Jack is in the book. We have La Llorona, of course, which we already talked about. And then we have Kid Cthulhu, which is one of, becoming my favorite as well. It's Cthulhu, the elder god, trapped in the body of a 7-year-old boy. And he's part of the CRYPTIDNALS also. And then there's the Goat Man, the Denton, Texas Goat Man. We also have there's a Rougarou from Louisiana. It's a female Rougarou. And a few other characters. We have fairies and other, cryptids and stuff like that. And those are, I guess you could consider them the good guys of the book. And then we have the bad guys, which are the new cryptids or monsters that are appearing in the world, which are taken directly from the cyberspace. We have the Black-Eyed Kids. We have the Rake also. And then our version of the Slender Man, because I always thought the Slender Man was kind of boring. It was just some dude in the woods with a 3-piece suit that lured people to their death. So I did some research, and we came up with our own Slender Man, and he's called El Ñango. And El Ñango means like a very lanky kind of a slender person as well. So that's the big bad of the book, El Ñango, which is an iteration of the Slender Man. And we even have Jeff the Killer in there also. These are the bad guys that the CRYPTIDNALS are facing off against in the book itself.
Okay. What about Chupacabra? You have a Chupacabra in there?
Yeah, there's a Chupacabra, and we pit him against the Goat Man. So the Goat Man, the Goat Man's like, hey, I heard about you, so it's in there as well. We even have a Jackalope in there.
Oh yeah, okay.
We put a Jackalope in there.
Is it going to be a series, or are you going to be writing more?
This one is complete in itself. We do leave ourselves a little bit of wiggle room at the end, so that if we want to continue it, we can. The artwork is crazy phenomenal, and the guy that draws it, Dario, he's been working on it for almost been a year. It's going to be 132 pages, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
And it's going to be one shot, so you get the whole story in one book. So you don't have to, wait around for the next issue or anything like that. And I think I sent you guys. Here, I'll send it in the chat real quick. But you don't have to worry about waiting for the next one or anything like that. Let me see if it comes up here. I think it did. No, it didn't come up. Oh, I'm sorry. But it's on Indiegogo. It's under the CRYPTIDNALS on Indiegogo if you guys want to check it out. And please, back the book and I'm pretty sure you'll like it because it has cryptids. It has a lot of supernatural stuff, a lot of stuff that I've done research into. And like I said, everything is drawn from reality or, an event in reality that had to deal with paranormal or cryptids. The main, I guess, story that's in the book is the one that happened in Dulce, New Mexico back in the 70s. I don't know if you guys have heard about that one, where there was supposedly, allegedly, there was a firefight on Sandia Plateau, which is in Dulce, New Mexico. Inside the plateau, there's a military facility.
Okay.
And at the very bottom, there was Nightmare Hall, and that's where all the aliens were doing experiments. There was that firefight between the military and the aliens. So that got my gears going, and I'm like, well, what happened? How did that come to pass, and how did it stop?
Yeah.
And that's in the book as well. What happened? The cryptids got involved in order to prevent something from happening, and that's where they all live now. They live in Nightmare Hall, that's located in the San Diego, New Mexico.
Okay.
I do remember that story.
And for the people watching, how can you get a hold of this book? How can you obtain it?
I was gonna try and send you the link. Let me see if I can get it really quick. Just give me 1 second. And you guys can keep talking. I'm just gonna go off the camera real quick. But let's see here. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, I mean, you can ask me whatever you'd like.
Well, I'd be curious to get your ideas on the relationship between some of the different cryptids, and what do you think they are, such as Sasquatch and Dogmen? What do you feel that? What do you think they are?
The Sasquatch, I've always believed that it is. It's a race, but it has different branches, just like I guess humans evolved from different branches. Like Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal man. I think the Sasquatch was also one of those branches, and as it continued, it's also continued to evolve into different subspecies. So of course, you have the main Sasquatch, which is the one that we all recognize with the cone-shaped head, and he's massively big, Bigfoot. And then you have the smaller ones that look kind of like monkeys, I guess. They're more, I guess, they look more juvenile.
Right.
Did we lose him?
I'm not sure.
All right. Are you guys still there?
Yeah. We lost you for a minute, but could hear you. Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to find that thing still. The Sasquatch that have devolved are the Dogmen Sasquatch. They look more feral. They're cannibals. They've been eating on each other, and that's why I guess their mouths have receded more, and you can see more of their teeth, and they just look more animalistic than the regular Bigfoot do. I think I found it. 1 second.
Oh, that's interesting.
What about you guys?
You're referring to the Dogmen? Is that what you're referring to?
The Dogmen. Okay. I know Josh is currently up there in Michigan. Have you seen anything up there?
I have not. I've seen which I believe is Sasquatch, but I have not seen Dogman. I know some of my teammates have seen what they would consider Dogman. But I don't ever want to. I don't ever want to come across it. I think I'd rather come across a stick man or a rake than a dog man.
Oh man, yeah, you're right. The rake is very interesting. I feel, without giving away too much, I feel like the rake is also an offshoot of Bigfoot, kind of like when dogs get mange. That's what kind of I think the rake is, more or less. Like it's a diseased sickly Sasquatch. Yeah, it's sickly. It's more feral because it's at the end of its days. Everything's elongated, and that's why it looks the way that it does. I sent you the link in the private chat, so you can check it out.
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
Oh yes, I do see that.
Yeah, the rake. That I always feel like the rake is kind of like an offshoot of that, but I'm not exactly sure how it I guess it works, or what. I mean, because nobody really knows what their habits are. So,
right, or or what the relationship between some of the cryptids. I mean, I've heard reports of of Sasquatch and Dogmen, not really the Dogmen species or whatever the Dogmen is, and Sasquatch staying away from each other. But then I've heard other reports of them being seen together.
Oh wow.
So, there's always questionable, I guess, as to what their relationship to each other is. But I was telling somebody yesterday about a story about that I heard about a guy that was hiking, and there was two ladies that were hiking ahead of him on a trail. They were higher up on the hill or the mountain, and he happened to be at a spot where he could see on the edge of the woods. He saw what looked like a Sasquatch and a Dogman walk out together.
What?
On the edge of those woods, yeah, and they couldn't see him at the angle he was at, and he swears that Sasquatch made some kind of motion to the Dogman and then pointed at those women, and that Dogman started walking towards those women.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't see him. But the guy said it got about halfway towards him, and so he said he walked up a little faster so that it would see him, because he was worried about what it was going to do to those women. And it did see him, and it said it turned, looked at him, and started heading his direction.
Oh, wow.
He had a walking stick, and he said out of instinct, he pointed that walking stick at that thing as it got up closer to him, and it said it stopped and looked at him. He pointed like a gun and said it stopped and looked at that thing and kind of looked at him, looked back at that thing like he wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
And then turned around and kind of trotted back off to the edge of the woods with that Sasquatch, and they both went off into the woods.
Wow.
But it was almost like the Sasquatch was kind of in charge, which I thought was odd.
I mean, I've heard about that, that that they're, I guess, the apex animal in the woods, if you want to call them animals, whatever you want to say. Because I mean, I don't know where you guys stand on that. Do you think they're animals, or are they some sort of like being?
I personally believe they're more human than they are animal. I think I feel like that they have a lot of. I feel like they're very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
They can reason.
Which
seems like they have a lot of human traits, but then you hear others. You hear other behavior that's very ape-like sometimes. So it's I guess if I was to guess, it seems like they're a little of both. But some of the DNA study, I followed the DNA study that was done from the Sasquatch genome, and I feel like that there's something to that, and that at least maybe from the nuclear DNA, it seems like there's something that's not in the database. Like, basically, I don't know if you've followed that, but according to the Genome Project, the female side is human.
Mm-hmm.
The mitochondrial DNA is human. When they do a nuclear DNA, they come back with some sort of DNA that doesn't not even close to anything in the database, which is odd. And so I don't know what to think about that.
I've heard well, two things really. Well, first, I mean, let me ask the first question. I've heard a lot of stories where Sasquatch tend to take women. They take them into the woods and they're never seen again. And when you mentioned that about the female part of the DNA, that like just like started the gears turning, I guess.
Yeah, and it's basically going back when it was it's a hybrid. According to DNA, it's a hybrid. Back at some point, something that's not in the database is crossed with a human female, and that's how the hybridization got started.
Okay, and then on the second part of that is the issue with the Nephilim. Have you guys have heard about that whole that these are children of the Nephilim? That's how far back they go and stuff.
Yes,
I do, and I do lean that direction.
Oh, okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah,
so
I lean.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and the reason I lean that direction, well, several reasons, but one of this DNA supports that because there's some things in that DNA that appear not to be totally natural with that hybridization. So I guess that would explain if it came from something biblical like that and mated with humans.
See, and that's what I lean more towards that as well. That they are children of the Nephilim, especially with all the other, I don't know what you want to call it, but all the other stuff that they find, like like these huge doors that are inside on the side of mountains and stuff. That how did they get there? Who made them, or who put them there? The bones that they would find back in the day of these like large humans, that they were larger than the regular human size,
right?
Stuff like that.
There's stories about the giant that was that killed in Afghanistan.
Yes, the Kandahar, the redheaded giant.
Yep. Lots of history there. You had mentioned Sasquatch kidnapping women. Yeah, there's a lot of history. The history goes way back, especially Native American history. There's a lot of talk about them taking women and children. Mm-hmm. There's a story about one tribe that ended up going out looking for them because they were stealing the children and eating them, supposedly. Mm-hmm. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and they ended up that tribe did end up finding the clan of Sasquatch and getting in a fight. I think a lot of the tribe members were killed, but I think they ended up also killing one of the two of the Sasquatch, I believe. But yeah, it seems like a lot. And a lot of the stories that I hear, a lot of the reports I hear, they seem to be very interested in women and children. Mm-hmm. They seem to show themselves to children.
Yes, exactly.
That brings to mind another report. There was a guy that I heard interviewed once that, as a child, Sasquatch used to come up to show itself to him at the house when he was playing in the backyard, and when his mother would come out, it would be gone. But he said one day that he saw. I forget how the story is told, but he saw a baby, basically an infant Sasquatch crawling around, and it crawled out to where he was playing, and then kind of crawled back to the fence line. And when he looked over there was a large Sasquatch standing by the fence. And he said he started to walk towards the fence, and when he got closer, he said that Sasquatch leaned forward like it was going to try to grab him, and he said he backed off and kind of ran into the house. And he thinks that thing was trying. He thinks that thing used the child to lure him and try to take him.
See, and that goes back to the whole, they're capable of reasoning. They have intelligence.
Yeah.
They're not animals.
Right.
Like you said, I agree with you totally on that. I think they are a product. They're a hybrid of human and something else. And in this case, I'm going to say it's Nephilim. It's something like that produced them.
And you've got a lot of a lot of people that have theories about them being the aliens doing DNA type, hybridization and stuff. And then you have the biblical side. I lean more towards the biblical, but really, I guess that DNA finding could probably support either way. It seems like, both belief systems. And who knows what the relationship is between the biblical beings and aliens. Maybe there's some type of, I think I've talked to some people who believe that the aliens are actually demons or angels or whatever. You hear all kinds of theories.
I've heard that theory as well, that they are, it's the only way. And that's another thing too, that apparently, and we're getting into some other stuff too, that apparently like aliens, the only way that they can present themselves on this reality is by looking the way that they do, that's not really their true form. And that leads to the idea that perhaps they are some sort of other thing, like that, like you said, a demon or an alien or rather an angel or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There does seem to be a lot of, at least from my feeling is there seems to be a lot of similarities between a lot of these different cryptids, aliens, missing 411 cases.
Oh man, no, we get into that.
Yeah,
that stuff.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot. I feel like all these all these subjects, all these different, there's some kind of relationship. I feel like there's some overall relationship between all this. I feel like.
See, that's something that's always been really curious to me, as to all these things exist, but where's the correlation? What is going on? And in the book, going back to the book, I tried to make reference of that in a way where, I mean, it makes sense without giving away too much of the book. I try to make it make sense as to why these things know each other, and
Right.
They cohabitate in the world. And once again, it goes back to the whole what happened in Dulce. What happened in Dulce is a big deal in the comic, in the book, as to why the cryptids are, I guess, chummy with each other. Like, why does Spring Hill Jack hang out with La Llorona, and the man dog is there, and there's these Bigfoots running around, and the Orogaru, and the Goat Man, stuff like that. Right. And like you're saying, there has to be some sort of correlation as to why these things exist together.
Why does that? I think another example is with Sasquatch. Why, for example, in a lot of cases, Sasquatch will mess with. They'll come around the camps and come around and kind of throw rocks, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But very seldom do they really show themselves. It's almost like, and I've heard other researchers say this, and it kind of makes sense, is that it's almost like they're not allowed to show themselves for whatever reason. Like some reason they're not allowed to be able to interact. They can interact to some extent. It's almost like they can't show themselves. So what they do is the next best thing, and that is throw rocks at us or come around and and spy on us and mess with us while we're sleeping in tents and that kind of stuff. But they can't
make noises and make themselves known that they're there and stuff.
Well, why don't they go to the next step and just walk out there and try to communicate with us?
See, that's something that's always been on my mind as well. And it goes to me. I mean, myself, it comes back to the whole the alien thing. Like, maybe they're just being watched, or maybe they're sent out by the Greys or whatever you want to call them. Because of course, we start getting into the different races of aliens and stuff like that. I usually just defer to the Greys because that's the one that's most well known. But what agreement do they have? Are they on another level where the Greys are able to appear to them and communicate with them, and in exchange, they don't show themselves to humans because humans aren't worthy, or what exactly is going on there?
Yeah. And if they do have capabilities, like some people believe, where they can travel to other dimensions, well, that would make sense, because I've always felt like aliens weren't necessarily from other planets, that they were probably just interdimensional. They're more interdimensional than they are, from other planets.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of people talk about certain situation with Sasquatch where footprints kind of disappear out in the middle of the field. They start and then they just kind of disappear.
Oh yeah. Now that you mentioned that, I did have a certain experience like that.
Okay.
It wasn't so much Sasquatch driven as it was more, man, and I hate using this word, but it was more, I guess, like skinwalker driven than anything else. I don't like using that word because, let me tell you the story really quickly. So back when I started getting into all of this, I had a group of friends that were also into it, and we started studying a lot of, Carlos Castañeda and stuff like that. We got really into the metaphysical, and we try and do out of body experiences, which I have been able to achieve once. I achieved it once, but that's a whole other story. And during that time, we had our teacher. Our teacher was showing us what to do and how to achieve, an enlightenment and stuff like that. But he also warned us of, naguales. And I think I mentioned this before. Naguales are pretty much the same thing as skinwalkers. They're an evil shaman. They choose a totem animal, and they can shapeshift into that animal. And he told us there's naguales out there, and you'll never know who they are, because that's how they like it. They like to keep their identity hidden until it's too late. And I remember when I was going to college back in the day, there was this one guy that I really didn't like, and I know that he was native but I always, picked on him. We always picked on each other.
Yeah.
And this one time, I remember I crossed the line and I really, really insulted him in front of a lot of people. And he was upset, and he told me straight out, like, I hope you enjoy this weekend. He just left it at that. And that night, it was a Friday night, my friends and I went out to the desert, and the desert is very accessible to us. It's very easy to get to the desert from where we're at. Maybe like 20 minutes, and we're in the desert, and there's nothing around. There's just sand or whatever. Okay. And that night, we went out there to the desert. We're hanging out. There was about 7 of us who were, we weren't even drinking. We were drinking like soda pop. We were drinking root beer and stuff like that, and hanging out. And that's during the time that we were very much into the whole path, the agreements, the Castañeda thing, and we were discussing it amongst ourselves. And in this area of the desert, there was nothing then, like it was empty. But we started hearing dogs barking, rah, 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 all around us. We started hearing dogs, and at first it was a few, and we didn't really notice them. But then it started picking up, and we started it was obvious that they were around us, and it seemed like they were getting closer. So my friends and I started looking around, and we all seemed to panic at the same time. And we all jumped in the car and we drove to get out of the desert. And we're driving, and as we're driving, we have the windows open because it was towards summer. It was in early spring, or late spring rather. And we're driving towards the I-10 to get away from the desert, to get into actual the city, I guess you could say. Uh-huh. And we started hearing these things running next to us, but we're looking and there's nothing there. And we're looking, and we can actually feel the sensation of being chased by something. And I swear we felt like something bump into the car, like it would bump into the car, like it was just hitting on either side of the car. And I'm looking right out the window and there's nothing there. And it was intensifying to the point where we thought we were going to be driven off the road. But right at that point, we drove into the I-10. Like we made it to the I-10, to the regular road, and we started driving down the road, and everything just seemed to stop. The sensation just stopped.
Yeah.
And we got back to my friend's house that was very nearby, and we were all hanging out outside discussing what had just happened, and we all got upset. We all got pissed because of that. Because how can this happen? We're enlightened beings. This shouldn't be going on. We're on the path. We're learning about this stuff. So all of us had this overwhelming, drive to just go back into the desert where we were at. So we all just jumped back in the car and we drove right back to where we were at.
Yeah.
We drove out there. We got out. We were looking around. We drew, my friend drew a protective circle around the car. And this is where it started getting kind of weird. He drew a protective circle around the car, and we're standing outside the car. We're standing against the car inside the circle, and the cops show up. And they see a bunch of people out there, all of us, just standing around. And there was about 4 cops, and they all walk up to us. And we noticed that none of them crossed the circle that we had drawn on the floor. And they're shining their flashlights at us, and they're asking us, hey, what are you guys doing out here? It's really late. You shouldn't be out here. None of them asked us for our IDs. None of them asked us, who were smoking or drinking or anything. We told him straight out, we're nothing, officer. We're just hanging out. We're just talking. They looked at us. They looked at the car, but they didn't cross to look inside the windows.
Yeah.
They all at the same time, and I remember this very vividly. At the same time, they all stepped back, and they're like, "Okay, you guys, just be careful." They all got back in their cars and they drove off. And we're like, "What the hell?"
Wow.
And then we started hearing it again. We started hearing the barking again. And we all went off into the desert to see if we could find whatever it was that was making this noise, this sound. And we're stomping around the desert, where is it? Real angrily and stuff. And we found a set of prints on the floor. And it was dog prints, like a dog, paw prints. And we started following them. As we started following them, and it was the moon was bright that night. It was a full moon. We could see them very clearly on the ground where the paw prints were going. And then the prints started getting further and further away from each other. Like if this thing had just decided to get up on both legs and start walking like a person.
Wow.
And we're following it. And at one point in time, we get to a point where the paw hits and the front of it picked up and you could see the print, and it looked like human toes. It looked like human toes, and it went into this huge bush, and the bush was very, very dark, like extremely dark, darker than the rest of the area, even though there was bright moonlight right above us. And we all stopped. And once again, we got this overwhelming fear that just kind of invaded all of us. And when we were learning all this stuff, I was taught, or we were all taught, never to run from anything, to walk away. Like if you guys remember Last Unicorn, you never run from anything immortal because you'll see it and it'll chase you. So that's the same mentality that I had. And I told these guys, okay, let's turn around and just walk away because that bush looks really dark. It doesn't look inviting. It doesn't look like we should go any further. And we all turned around and started walking, and all of us at the same time got this fear, and they all started running. They just started hauling ass. And I'm like, what the hell? And I just started running with them. And it felt like we were being chased again. We got to the car, we got inside, and we drove off again. We got back to my friend's house, and we were just exchanging notes as to what had happened. We're all scared. So the next Monday, we went back to school, to college, community college. And I was walking around, and I saw that guy. And I went up to him, and I was about to say something, and he turns around, he sees me, and the only thing that he says, like, so, did you enjoy what I sent you? And that just, like, it just chilled me. And even saying it, man, I'm, like, getting all, like, oh, my God. It chilled me to the bone, and I just turned around, and I just walked away, and I left him alone. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. Of course, he still kind of, like, popped up in my life every once in a while. But after that, I just did not want anything to do with him at all.
You never asked him about that or never said anything? No,
I never asked him. I asked friends of ours who were, or like, friends that were friends with him, friends of mine that were friends with him, if he had done anything or if he was into anything. And they said that he was into some stuff, but they didn't know what he was into.
Wow,
so,
that's spooky.
That was really, really creepy. Especially that paw print. And and I forgot about that until right now. When we started talking about this, it started jogging my memory again. And
how big was that print compared to a normal sized dog?
It seemed like it was a pretty big dog. I mean, I've had dogs. I've had German Shepherds. I had Doberman, and I would say it was as big as like a a German Shepherd.
Okay.
So it was a pretty large print.
Yeah.
But just that one part where it decided, whatever, and it started to get up and start walking on both legs, and you could see it very clearly with the prints and the way that they just fell on the ground. And there was sand too. It's very soft dirt, so you can see them very clearly. And that just that sealed the deal for me right there. Like, whoa, what the hell are we messing with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I had forgotten about that, but thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, we are an hour in. Is there anything you wanted to talk about with the book before we
or tell the audience?
Yeah.
Just if you guys get a chance, take a look at the book. You will not be disappointed. All the great ones are in there, of course. We got Bigfoot, we got the Llorona. We even have Mothman in there. I think the Loch Ness Monster is in there somewhere as well. It's very horror oriented. It's not like a slasher. It's more disturbing horror that stays with you after you read it. Yeah. And that's the kind of horror that I like. So, it's going to stay with you. And hopefully this inspires you to go out and, cryptid hunt on your own and see what you can find. I'm still wanting to go up there to Michigan, man, because I want to experience the Dogman for myself. So,
well, if you're ever up this way, let me know and I can take you out.
Oh, definitely. I want to go out there and see. Oh, man, you can show me all the stuff that you know. Maybe we can go out to see the Mothman too. Where is that exactly? Is that in Virginia or where is that?
West Virginia. Yep.
West Virginia.
Yep.
Maybe I'll take a trip down to West Virginia because the Mothman has always fascinated me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got the Mothman Festival coming up too. Actually.
Oh, damn.
In September.
I just got my plush. He's up there. My plushie Mothman and stuff.
And then
so,
the Michigan conference is when, Josh?
July 17th.
July 17th.
Coming up, yeah.
In Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh, nice. That's a nice area of the country.
Yeah,
So-
we're gonna head up to that as well.
Oh man, please post pictures. I'm on Facebook ban right now, but as soon as I get my Facebook back,
I got you.
I'll check you guys out. Yeah, I said something dumb. Apparently, Facebook didn't like it, so they banned me for like 30 days and stuff.
Oh
so.
yeah.
I was on a thread that they were talking about the Logan Paul versus Mike Tyson fight,
Oh,
and I posted like, I hope Mike kicks his ass, but apparently I put kills his ass, and Facebook didn't like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're a little sensitive sometimes. I've got some friends that had the same problem where they got blocked
All right,
out.
I am going to end the show, and you're welcome to stay afterwards.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, and thank you guys for having me once again.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on.
You guys can find me on the CRYPTIDNALS on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
We will check. I will definitely check the book out.
Hiding